You know what I loved about Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark? He brought to life one of cinema's greatest dicks.
Dicks? Like a man dick?
He was hilarious, charismatic, larger than life. Even as Robert Downey Jr. made sure we always saw the humanity in Tony. He was, without a doubt, perfectly cast in the role of Tony Stark, and it's been said many times before, but I'll say it again. The MCU wouldn't exist without Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. At this point, the man and the character seem so intertwined they're almost inseparable, for better or worse when considering the current state of the MCU. Because what's been missing since Endgame? A character to center the universe around. I already made a video about the fact that Phase 4 of the MCU sucks, but now I want to discuss why it sucks. Besides Disney's incessant need to prioritize agenda over good writing, there's something else here too. And it's the fact that they're missing someone like Robert Downey Jr. RDJ represents a double-edged sword. He was the centerpiece when he was around, but it creates such a massive void, it's difficult to think of how to match that kind of character, let alone one-up him. Not only would this require finding the right character, but finding the right person to play them. It's a fucking tall order, and one they don't even seem to be trying for. But they, might want to. Kevin Feige wisely decided to make Tony Stark the cornerstone of the new sprawling Marvel universe back in the late 2000s. I wonder if the MCU would even exist if Downey Jr.'s Iron Man hadn't been the first film from Marvel Studios. Incredible Hulk followed shortly after Iron Man came out to stellar reviews from both critics and moviegoers, and Hulk performed mildly at best, and the goodwill from Iron Man most likely gave old Hulk a box office boost. Tony Stark's short cameo at the end of the movie was even featured prominently in the advertising for Incredible Hulk. Iron Man was the MCU's anchor, and after giving it some thought, I realized that's what's been missing from Phase 4. Not necessarily Iron Man himself, but Phase 4 doesn't have a central figure, that anchor to hold down the fort. Tony Stark's presence almost guaranteed a baseline of quality, something comfortable, something to look forward to. Without that cornerstone, the MCU has felt more than a little derailed, more than a little directionless without Tony, to put it gently. Captain America might have been the leader of the Avengers, but Iron Man was their foundation, as well as the foundation for the entire MCU. Can anyone name a current character like that right now?
Absolutely fucking not.
An even bigger question might be, is it possible to replace that kind of presence? Consider this. Through 3 phases of the MCU spanning 11 years, Iron Man was in 10 out of 23 movies, and he was on screen for 8 out of 11 of those years. That included appearing on screen in 7 out of 8 years from 2012 to 2019, and 5 straight years from 2015 to 2019. That's not just fucking crazy, that is what you call the backbone of the MCU. Even though Captain America is my favorite MCU character, I'll be the first to admit that he only came into his own because of his cool, calm, and respectful personality, being a contrast to Iron Man's unpredictable and often disrespectful one.
I have successfully privatized world peace.
All right, so if I lift it, I then rule Asgard?
Yes, of course.
I will be reinstituting prima nocta.
Iron Man worked without Cap, and while Cap had one of the best movies in the MCU with Winter Soldier, the character of Steve Rogers really found his footing as co-lead in the MCU after the events of Civil War, when the tension between Steve and Tony reached its apex.
Isn't that the why we fight? So we can end the fight? So we get to go home?
Shouldn't let your state you know. Yes.
I'd argue it was Steve's relationship with Tony that brought out the best in this iteration of the character. So if Iron Man brought out the best in his co-lead, what do you think he did with the other characters in the MCU? Well, he certainly helped us get through some of the duds in the ever-expanding universe. If it wasn't for him, we probably wouldn't have been so forgiving with some of the shittier, mid-as-fuck to absolutely abysmal movies that came out. With my nostalgia glasses removed, I think it's safe to say AntMan was an inconsequential film at best. Not the character, but certainly both of his movies. I wouldn't call them MCU highlights by any stretch. Thor: The Dark World? Enough said there. Captain Marvel?
Would Brie Larson work out? Like, hypothetically, would I at some point? Is that like a personal attack or something?
And speaking of duds, since the start of Phase 4, what else do we have besides those? MCU properties have ranged from mid to complete dog dookie besides Spider-Man, even though it's apparently trendy to hate on that movie now, but you won't see me following that one. That movie fucking owns, and if you want to make something of it, come to Indigo Plateau for a Pokemon battle. We'll sort it out Charizard to Blastoise.
like real men.
We've had failures of new properties and wheel-spinning sequels to popular leftovers from previous phases that have denigrated some of our favorite heroes, leading to a universe that's completely disjointed. Mix all that with complete oversaturation and you have one hell of a mid-product compared to what it used to be. Have they announced their plan for Phase 5 and 6? Yeah. Kind of. Certainly seemed a little more like pressing a panic button, since even the most ardent MCU stan can squeeze out an admittance that Marvel has been middle of the road for the past couple of years at the very least. A typical argument I've seen is that this is what happened in Phase 1. Heroes going through their own stories and then coming together. First of all, no. The plans were set for the first Avengers movie from the onset. Marvel had planned for 5 movies with Iron Man being the first, and after its success, in May 2008 they announced the release date for the Avengers as summer 2011, although it did end up being released in 2012. At the time there wasn't a giant overarching story, no, but the Avengers was the first direction. Phase 4 doesn't even have that. There is no team. There is no pattern it's following, it's nothing like Phase 1. The narrative was and still is correct. It's directionless. And without a backbone character like Iron Man to lead us through the bog of shit we find ourselves in and deliver us to the promised land, we're kind of hanging out on the Titanic right now. Even with Secret Wars as the destination, who's bringing us there? After Endgame, there was a lot of excited speculation from who would be the new lead of the MCU. And I include myself in this. But I think I was a bit blind to the fact that there really wasn't anyone who could possibly take Tony's place. Let's see, who do we have? Captain Marvel? Black Panther? No, he would have been a great co-lead to the MCU, much closer to a Captain America replacement in spirit. More of the quiet, reserved badass who'd still need that charismatic counterpart. What about Spider-Man? Please. While I love the character and really enjoy what Tom Holland's doing, Marvel would never make a character the figurehead of the MCU whose movie rights are owned by another studio, so we're shit out of luck there. How about Doctor Strange? Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange is just as much of a wise ass as Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. It's why they were paired up in Infinity War, because they played well off each other.
What is your job exactly besides making balloon animals?
Protecting your reality, douchebag.
But we all know what they've been doing to him. He's used as a connecting piece and a plot mover, but making him a side character in his own movie.
Look how they massacred my boy.
And as far as everyone else, who the fuck cares about him? There's a reason B-list versions of legacy characters came in after. If they were as interesting as the originals, they wouldn't be second in line. There's no other way to put it. Black Widow 2.0 isn't as cool as Black Widow 1. These characters are fucking third string quarterbacks. So anyway, I'm not here to fan cast future characters. I don't particularly enjoy that sort of thing, but we can definitely take a look at what characters are potential replacements. How about Reed Richards? Even if you got John Krasinski as the main MCU Reed, I think I summed up my thoughts concerning his take on the character with, he plays Reed as John Krasinski, super nice person. That's about it. Next. What about Wolverine? We know the character himself is iconic and already has a legendary film portrayal.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lensher.
Sounds Xavier.
Go fuck yourself.
Thank you, Hugh Jackman, Lord. I know everyone's complained that there was too much Wolverine in Fox's X-Men movies, but there's a reason he got his own trilogy. He's that fucking popular. Jackman played the character that fucking good, and you're full of shit if you don't have a small ember of hope and excitement still burning about the potential for Wolverine in the MCU. But with their current agenda, Marvel seems like they'd rather eat shit straight from a butthole than make him a focal point. You know, maybe it ends up being a villain. Maybe Doctor Doom is what does it. Maybe Doom is who the MCU gets centered around. The character certainly offers plenty for an actor to do, even with a mask. There are plenty of people in Hollywood who could kill this role. It would even allow the MCU to keep fucking around with what the drinker calls the message. Maybe then they could actually worry about writing a good story instead of just checking boxes. Regardless of whether or not they find the next Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark actor-character combo to lead the MCU, Phase 4 is a straight-up fucking dud. We got some mid, we got some great, but we got mostly cringe. You know what? Fuck Phase 4. Phase 5 looks no different. It looks like a stopgap to get to Secret Wars, and again, who's our backbone? Who's the character we're riding with until the end? Can you think of a single character right now you'd be upset with seeing sacrifice themselves like we saw Tony do at the end of Endgame? Maybe if Captain Marvel were to do it? Yes! Yes! Guys, I said upset, not excited. There's potential with Doom, but that means waiting till Phase 6 and just a big ol' fuck you to Phase 4 and 5. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man was truly lightning in a bottle. The best luck ever for a studio just taking off back in the mid-2000s. And unfortunately, it set them up to believe their name is what sells the product. Completely forgetting it's not the Marvel logo we want to see. It's great characters, great actors, great stories all coming together in perfect synergy to create something greater than the sum of its parts. We know what the MCU needs, but maybe they aren't even seeking it out as an acknowledgement that what happened with Downey Jr.'s Iron Man really can't be replicated. I could be proven wrong, but only time will tell. And until next time,
GG's only.